Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Good Bloke, Not Woke podcast. This is episode 2. And unlike the first episode, I have a guest today and somebody who I admire greatly, and I really respect what he's doing in the world and how he's trying to make a difference. Welcome, Tony Rabah.
Thanks, JT. Thanks for having me, mate.
Yeah, no, very cool. I'm excited to have this conversation. I just want to do a bit of an introduction so you know who Tony is. Tony lives here in Melbourne. He had a long established career as an accountant, and it was interesting. We both spent part of our secondary school years at Christian Brothers schools, and we both escaped any sort of abuse, which is great. Tony holds a Bachelor of Business in Accounting from Victoria University and is also a registered tax agent and a member of the IPA. Through this, he's advised a range of organisations across various industries and sectors. As a trusted advisor, many of Tony's clients have also turned to him for personal advice, and his boardroom has always been a safe and friendly space for a chat. Tony used his vast experience helping others financially and personally to conceptualise and found the male hug. By doing so, realising his passion to provide a safe, non-judgmental platform for all men in need. Now, part of the reason Tony and I are connected is because twice in 3 days, quite prominent men from AFL backgrounds said to me, "Have you heard about the male hug? You should be involved in the male hug." So that led me to connecting with Tony, and we've had so many amazing conversations, and I've watched the metamorphosis of this incredible organisation build and grow and expand and reach out its influence, which is really an influence that is motivated by a profound intention for care. And today, many people know about the male hug, lots of corporations reaching out, wanting to be involved. And it all comes from the intentions and the energy, and I reckon the courage of this man here, Tony, and really keen to have this conversation, mate, because in this podcast, we're talking all about healthy masculinity and men really evolving and developing a really strong and robust moral compass and having the courage to live by it. And it seems to me that maybe that's what happened for you in the formation of the male hug.
Yeah, thanks, Johnny. It's as I said, it's great to be here, mate, and it's so wonderful to have you involved in the male hug as well. I've enjoyed every step of the journey, and it's probably been about 3 years since you and I first met, and we've formed a good friendship and a wonderful working relationship. And it's I guess, you know, as men, we from a very young age, we find ourselves in different situations as we wander through the years of teenage and 20s and 30s and onwards. And the key is to get yourself out of those situations. And I reckon that talking really does help, and to come out of the other side a better person than the bloke that went in. And sadly, a lot of men, they get lost. They don't get out the other side as a better version of the person that went into that situation. And, you know, we've all had situations in life. You've been there, I've been there, whether it's been business or personal, where we make mistakes, we find ourselves a little bit lost. But certainly as an accountant, and I still do practice as an accountant, but I've always looked after my clients' personal needs in addition to their financial needs. And I've always enjoyed the fact that they can have a chat with me on anything that's concerning them. And that's where the passion, I suppose, was born. And I've also been through my own personal stuff over the years, and we get some things right, we get some things wrong, but we learn. That's where the greatest learnings come from. So, so the male hug's playing a very important role in society, I believe. And you're magnificent as well.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's because I reckon, you know, from my learnings and education over time, probably the thing that human beings fear more than death is humiliation. And I often look at it and, you know, I see people who are in business, you know, you just take, for example, a small restaurant. When somebody opened that restaurant, one of the first things they had to do was sign a lease that could potentially send them bankrupt. because if the business didn't work, they're liable for that lease. And I think there's enormous amounts of courage in setting up a business. And of course, when that business fails, there can be an enormous amount of fear. I've been there. I've been in that position, and it can really take away your capacity to think rationally. You become reactive. The stress levels can drive you insane, really, stop you sleeping. For some people, it sends them to drink and to alcohol. And, I think the word that we get to is that people find themselves in a state of desperation.
Yeah.
And you've experienced that, I know. And
Yeah.
it's like, what do you think it is that stops people from, well, men particularly, but all people from reaching out to get help, to just admit that they've got themselves in a really awful place?
Oh, you're 100% correct, John. And it's pride, it's ego, it's the fear of judgment. And I obviously, started off in accounting in '97. 2003, won a tender for a location at Federation Square, set up a restaurant, and then stepped away from accounting in 2006 to run this restaurant. And then 2008 into 9, the GFC came along, and that was wow. So and yeah, a lot of desperation. You're under so much pressure that you're not yourself anymore. You're behaving in a manner that's very irrational, very desperate. You're trying to everything you can do to get out. And I was very fortunate that in the end I had a buyer that came along and said, "I just want the location." But I reckon back then I was probably maybe 20% of the guy that I am today. But a lot of guys and women in business do not, particularly men, they don't reach out for fear of judgment and the ego and the embarrassment of financial difficulties and going into financial strife. So there's a lot of people going through that today. I mean, obviously COVID really sorted out a lot of small businesses, and but the one thing that people should remember is that there's always someone out there to help. I guess those that want to judge, good luck to them. When you don't know someone's story, it's nice to just. My father used to always say, if you haven't got anything nice to say, just don't say anything at all. Just stay out of it. So easier said than done at times, but yeah, ego and pride, Johnny, are the things that really hold people back.
I suppose that experience, do you feel like that was a big part of what happened for you that led you towards establishing the Male Hug?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's embarrassing when people are looking at you in a way that the business didn't go under. I ended up selling it in the end, but there was a lot of financial turmoil involved in it. But people are very cruel in the way they treat you, and but I think what I did do was reach out to a couple of people in my family who were very supportive, and it sort of made things a little bit easier eventually when I started to talk. And the Male Hug was obviously born as a result of this, and also the fact that I've done this with clients for many years, and I know that talking helps, talking works, and talking definitely does make a difference. And you come back the other side a much better version of the person that went in, and that's the beauty of opening up and getting help. And some people don't do that. Some people just turn to drink or alcohol or gambling or drugs and all sorts of things. But yeah, we should always be very, very empathetic to people going through situations, because you don't know what someone's going through.
Yeah, true. Very true. So, Tony, you're a 40-something-year-old Lebanese Australian man with a big heart and strong views. And I know that you're a man who's not afraid to say what you think, and I like that. What do you reckon were the biggest lessons that you encountered that helped you gain a strong moral compass and help you to develop to the level of decency that you carry in your life right now?
Yeah, thanks, Johnny. Bit kind there with the age side of it, but being a decent person is and authentic and genuine, I reckon, is something that I've always tried to sort of pride myself on. raised in a very, a very good, loving family, and just being decent was the right thing to do. And making mistakes doesn't mean that you're not decent. You just lose your way a bit. So being decent and kind, I think, are the two things that, have held me in really good stead all my life. And sometimes people confuse, someone that makes a mistake as they're not decent, but they are decent because they just trip up and they get desperate and they find their way in the world that, they land in a different spot and the judgment comes. But yeah, be decent, be kind. And you're very much that person too, Johnny.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, I often wonder, and I mean, I suppose this is just a comment more than something for open for discussion, but I often wonder how many men and women are in prison, costing the taxpayer an enormous amount of money because they just royally screwed up. It could have been a 10-minute brain freeze that led them to do something that they wouldn't normally do. And, people can argue the toss, but I wonder how many of those people would trade that time in incarceration to step back into the community and donate several hours a week of their time and their expertise to benefit the community and make genuine amends for what they did. And I just wonder about that, because we have in Aboriginal culture in Australia with their traditional law, when somebody really screws up, they cop a punishment. It could be a spear through the lower leg, but once it's done, it's done. They don't carry a record around with them forever. Whereas here in Australia, once somebody's been incarcerated, they carry a record with them. And I find that, it's a little primitive, I think. But anyway, other people might have different perspectives. Tony, you and I went to a luncheon on Friday, and thanks for the invite, by the way, to a suburban cricket club. And there would have been, I don't know, 200 people there, do you think? And it was a great event at the club. I really admire when local sporting clubs can get that sort of audience on a work day to come to an event. And, there was great food served, people were drinking. The MC, Tony Shebeki, who's a good friend of the Male Hug, brilliant, just so good at what he does. They had two great guests, one a former Australian cricketer and another one a champion AFL footballer, and they shared stories and they had enough humour, but there was some good serious parts of what they shared. And, that was great. But then the final guest came along, and what happened? It was like, he's a superstar in his time, but I was amazed by how crass his presentation was. And, he'd done enough as an athlete to share good stories, but he's sort of now parading sort of semi as a comedian. But it was just so crass. And I was looking around the room and there was a lot of cringe happening in the room. And, I just wanted to chat with you about this. And I leaned over and I talked to you about it. And I thought, wow, what's this sporting club really trying to achieve here? Because the first part of this was extraordinary, but the second part of it, I felt they lost all of what they could have gained from it. And, and I just put an idea to you about what the Male Hug could do. And I'm just interested in your impression of that, because there was a lot of women in the room and a lot of young, very impressionable men. And I just felt like what was offered wasn't needed, and it might be contrary to what that club would really like to identify itself as.
Yeah, look, I obviously very appreciative of what the cricket club did for the Male Hug, and they've supported us the last couple of years. And yeah, I like you. I was a little bit sort of taken aback with the final guest and his antics and his ways on stage, and yeah, it was. I saw a bloke that was a little bit lost and was looking sort of for cheap laughs to and once again, we're not judging. We're just saying that there's maybe some conversations need to be had. with people close to him, because he was not what I expected. I expected humour and laughter, and we got some of that, but there was some stuff that we saw that was a little bit concerning. So, but yeah, I think a lot of people would have felt, well, what just happened the last 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely needs to, maybe someone like yourself, JT, to reach out to him and catch up for a coffee. Because I reckon sometimes that's all people need, just someone who says, I noticed something and I actually I care, and let's have a chat. Because sometimes people give up and they think that they don't, they're not worthy of being treated as a good citizen, because for whatever they've done in their life.
I think that, I reckon when somebody goes to the gutter to get their humour, it's lazy humour. And I think this is where we sort of, we walk this line where we notice things, and you're right. Somebody does need to reach out to him, and I don't know the guy personally. If I did, I would go and sit him down and have a cup of coffee and see if he's open to exploring some perspectives, and he may not be, and I think that, I was talking to a bunch of schoolboys last year, and I was talking to them about healthy masculinity, and the fact that labels get thrown around at men like privileged white male and toxic masculinity and that sort of thing. And I think probably what we were seeing was, on show in bright lights, toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
Very, very derogatory male type humor. And, that used to work once, but the one thing about humanity and societies, we do evolve when we're moving beyond that. But I think also what happens is when you put on a show like that at a local football club, you're almost rubber stamping that behavior to the young guys around the club. And now I feel like that we can do some great work there to help those clubs sort of rise up out of that. And it doesn't mean you can't have fun and you can't have humor. I mean, my God, we as human beings, we've got to learn to laugh more.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting, the cheapness of that and how that sort of. And I was saying to the schoolboys, I said, do you want to know what toxic masculinity is? It's being a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
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 And I said, part of your journey to the development of your own moral compass and the courage to live by it is to show up when your mates are being fucking idiots.
Yeah.
And to pull them into line and help them re-navigate and get their compass straight,
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, the idea we talked about with footy clubs and the male hug, what do you think?
No, I'm all for that. In fact, when I at the table we were sitting at, there was a young guy sitting there, and he reached out and he said to me, "Well done on the male hug." He said, "I participate in Talktober each year, and I have done for the last 2 years." And I think he was a 22-year-old, young guy, and I said, "Well, what did you get out of it?" And he said, "I actually was reaching out to my friends to say I'm doing Talktober. Do you want to have a coffee or a beer or play a game of golf? Let's have a chat." And he used Talktober as the icebreaker, I guess, to discuss. And that made me feel amazing. I'll be honest with you. I for a young guy and he was getting excited about this year's Talktober, which, once again, the rewards there are just, we all work and we have careers and we set up businesses to make as much money as we can, and that's wonderful. But when you get a reward out of someone getting the benefit of a product that you've delivered to the community as Talktober, and I'll talk about that later, that makes you feel really, really good. There's a very, very early on in my accounting days, a gentleman said to me, "You never want to be the richest bloke in the cemetery." And I thought about it for a while, and I thought, gee, that's a ripper. That's a good one. And I reckon a lot of people need to hear that, because they're living and like they're never going to leave this place. And yeah, it's so that made my day. That young bloke, his name was Jack. That was a lovely thing to say.
Yeah, that was pretty special. And it's interesting you're talking about that. It sort of reminds me of a line in one of the books from the Avatar course when I taught the Avatar course that said, don't let what you're being get in the way of what you might become.
Mm,
And I feel like part of that challenge too is that with men and how they evaluate themselves is on their financial success, or perhaps even more than that, their status.
yeah, yeah,
And, that came from the 80s. And the 80s was a vibrant part of human history because there was massive economic growth and the share market became a center of growth and people started to get into property and so this whole success thing was about money and wealth and status and how you're viewed, and we had to go through that. But at the end of the day, it's like when you create all that, that's who you're being. But the question I'm more interested in is, but who are you? And what are the things that leave you feeling really good about yourself so that you can sleep well at night? And I doubt that it's the competitive struggles and the domination and who you've defeated during the day that's going to make you feel good about yourself.
No, I couldn't agree more, John. And actually, the president of the club we were at on Friday spoke to me later about your exact point about doing some mental health training with some of the young guys around the club, and your idea coming back to that, absolutely, we should look at taking that around the state because when the young bloke said to me that he's been participating in Talktober for the last 2 years, I thought that's really amazing because he's getting something out of it. His friends are getting something out of it, and to be able to connect using something like Talktober as the excuse is wonderful. So most definitely to take that around the state to local footy clubs and cricket clubs is something that is definitely on the agenda for the Male Hope for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I'm going to tell you a little story about something that happened. When I was 40, we moved out of Melbourne and moved down to live down at Red Hill. And I'd been working in the AFL for some years in high performance roles. And I still loved footy and I was very fit. So I decided to play football again. And I was playing for Red Hill. And one week we played against a team from a pretty, like an intensely working class part of Melbourne. And these fellas ran out in the field and there was a lot of tattoos. And this was back in the days before tattoos were a trendy thing. And a lot of tattoos and some pretty awful mullets, and they're pretty tough boys. And the game started, and one of their guys was a big fella, not quite as tall as me, but would have been heavy than me. He was a bodybuilder, he had big legs and big arms. He was running around throwing haymakers, king-hitting people behind the pack. And I noticed it, and I said to the umpire, "What are you going to do about that, umpy?" And the umpire said to me, "Just focus on your own game," which is umpires speak for, "I'm too scared to do anything about that."
Yeah.
Umpires don't tend to be big people, right? And that sort of stuff can be very intimidating, and takes a lot of courage to be an umpire in suburban football. And anyway, so I was running around, and I'd played a lot of footy. I was the biggest guy on my team, the most physically mature. I played footy at a very high level, and I thought I'm going to have to put this guy to sleep so that he doesn't hurt anybody. So I was running around looking for my opportunity to do to him what he was doing to others. But by that point, I must have been starting to grow up a little bit, Tony, because I started to contemplate the consequences of my actions, which would have been giving his teammates a green light to do what he was doing in retaliation. And so at quarter time, I ran over to him as we were heading into our huddles. And I said, "Mate, have you got a minute?" And he turned and shaped up to me and he said, "Yeah, what do you want?" And I said, "It's okay. I just want to talk to you for a sec." I said, "Listen, mate, you don't know me, but I'm a pretty good bloke. And all my teammates over there, they're all really good blokes too. Some of them are dads, their kids are here watching." And I said, "I imagine you're a good bloke too, and your teammates are probably really good blokes. So I can't understand why you're doing what you're doing." And he looked at me, Tony, and I swear his face nearly fell off. And he said, "Oh, sorry, mate. Oh, I just get carried away. I can be such an idiot sometimes." And I said, "Really?" And he said, "Oh, yeah." He goes, "I can be a real idiot sometimes." And I said, "Well, look, how about we do this? Put your fists away. Let's have a really good game of footy and I'll buy you beer after the game." And he said, "Yeah, all right, mate. Yeah, okay." And so off we went. And from the rest of the game, the rest of the 3 quarters, every time I marked the footy, he'd run past and go, "Oh, good mark, mate." And he was acknowledging my other teammates when they're doing well. There was a point in the 3rd quarter where he even ran into the centre square while waiting for the ball to come back after a goal, put his hand on the umpire's shoulder and said, "Umpy, you're doing a great job today, mate." He was a different human being. So after the game, I was in the social rooms and he came walking through the crowd with 2 beers and he handed me a beer. And I said, "I was going to buy you the beer." And he said, "Oh, no, I owe you the beer." And I said, "Why is that?" And he said, "Because I have not enjoyed a game of footy like that since I was a little kid."
Wow.
I said, "Really?" And he said, "Oh, I had such a good time out there today." I said, "Well, mate, you're a good player." And because I had attention on him, I could tell him things that I'd seen that he did during the game. And I said, "You should play like that more often. It's probably going to be more enjoyable." And he said, yeah, I probably should. And the conversation went quiet. And I just said to him, "But what about that other stuff? How's that working for you in your life?" And he said, "Yeah, no, not very good." I said, "Have you got kids?" And he said, "Yeah, I've got 3 kids." And I said, "Do you see them?" And he said, "No, I don't."
Wow.
Now, Tony, for me, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
In that moment, I thought to myself, what in hell is his footy club doing? Because that's what football clubs are for, you know? And
That's
so
incredible.
we had a conversation and I connected him with a friend of mine who was a men's counsellor who specialised in dealing with guys like that. He started seeing my friend regularly. And about 11 months later, I got a text from my friend one day that simply said, he's seeing his kids this weekend.
Oh, wow.
Now, you replay that. I could have knocked him out that day and I'd probably still be a legend at Red Hill Football Club, but he'd be dead and there'd be 3 kids without a dad.
Yeah.
You know? And
Yeah.
if the son's in there, they would probably emulate their dad.
Yeah.
And so the reason I share that story is because I hold profound hope for community sports clubs and what they can do in terms of nurturing men in the community. Because, Hillary Clinton once borrowed an African proverb that says it takes a village to raise a child. And there's so many young guys involved in that cricket club who perhaps don't see their dad,
Mm.
a bit unstable, they're a bit wobbly, but that cricket club could create an incredible environment to help them evolve into being really good, decent young men.
Oh, look, I couldn't agree more with you, Joe. That's an amazing story too, by the way. That's to be able to keep your head and take someone under your wing during a game of footy and work through it with them. That's wow. I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of people out there that are that behave in a certain way, and they get judged. People look at them and they judge them and they laugh at them or they call them things and without knowing the full story. But there's always someone. Everybody's got a story, and I think the more community like these community football clubs or cricket clubs can wrap their arms around people, then the better off that everybody will be. Because I know with the male hug, we get asked often, what are you doing for women? And we're doing a lot for women because the male hug is a passion to get men talking and encourage men to talk. But then if they are the best version of themselves, then the entire family is benefiting from that. And, the relationships that come from within that are extraordinary. And I think I've had one female ask me, what about the women? And I explained that, you have a father, a brother, a husband, a partner, a son, and yes, yes, yes. And then she looked at me and said, yeah, wow, that's a fair point. So, and we get a lot of women that come to our events. We get a lot of women that support our programs and campaigns that we run. So, but yeah, I think community football and cricket is a good starting point for people to wrap their arms around each other and really sort of get involved in each other's lives.
I think that that's part of the magic with surf lifesaving, which I was involved in for a long time, because there's such a service ethic there. It's a selflessness, and they're teaching young people to be in service to the community, and it really helps build lives. So footy clubs, cricket clubs, basketball, lacrosse, soccer and rugby fall under footy. I mean, it was very interesting that I read once years ago about the man who actually invented the game of rugby. He was a former military man who had a firm belief that military service played a crucial role in teaching young, adolescent boys to become good, decent men.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a sports master at this private school in England, and there was no military service available at the time. So he developed this game that was basically emulating a running battlefield. It's all about stealing territory and protecting territory and that sort of thing. And if you stand back and watch rugby union from that perspective, you understand the game. And it was through the participation in that game he wanted to teach boys qualities like good sportsmanship and hard work and courage and cooperation and loyalty and those sorts of things. And when you watch rugby union, you notice that they don't call the referee ref or umpy; they call him Mr. Rabah. There's a
Right.
code, yeah. And so I just feel that those and really rugby union was at the root of most forms of football, and that part of it's been lost. But I feel like with the work you're doing with the male hug and the education that can be provided, we can return that to community sport, which can have an incredible impact on the community. And I was telling you about one of the initiatives I was really keen to run was a thing I called the Away Project, aware of what's around you, and going in and educating people in these sports clubs to be more aware of what's happening around them, because every perpetrator of domestic violence leaves clues. And if people are unaware, they don't see those clues. And so there's terrible things happening behind closed doors. So there's a lot can be done. So I really acknowledge you and the whole of the Male Hug crew for the willingness to extend into those areas where you can really touch men's lives.
Yeah, no problems. Thanks, Johnny.
Yeah, so it's interesting, looking at this whole area of developing healthy masculinity, and we live in a time now where it seems to be a lot of comfort in our society. People are not having to fight for their existence because everybody's basically got more than enough food, apart from a very small percentage of society. They've got somewhere comfortable to sleep, and they can become a little bit, sort of a malaise, even a little bit apathetic about life. So I'm interested in where are the challenges that we can provide for young men to step into a space where they can start to grow as human beings and overcome their, I suppose, the animal parts of their thinking to develop and become better human beings. And, this leads into what I said about surf lifesaving before, service to others. Yeah. And service to others has been proven in research to be a profound factor in human well-being. And so giving young men, older men, the opportunity to reach out and support other people. So, and I look at your Talktober campaign and I just think, wow, what an opportunity for people to learn and be inspired to reach out. So I'd love you to tell us about the Talktober program, where it came from, how it's going, and anything else you'd like to share about it.
Yeah, thanks, John. So yeah, basically, Talktober was a concept that we devised back in about 4 years ago now. So it was basically I was sitting around with Tony Shebeki and we were discussing how we would make the Male Hug a little bit more impactful and what we could do early days. And Talktober was born, and Talktober was something that we decided to turn the month of October into Talktober to encourage men to talk, you know. And I've always believed that through talking and the power of talking, a lot of good things come because you can be, and you've got to be vulnerable and you've got to be very, very raw. Otherwise, no point talking. Because most guys, you speak to them, how you going? Yeah, I'm good. Move on. But in order to be to get maximum benefit, you've got to be able to be really vulnerable, have a chat, talk, you know, unpack what's really happening. And I reckon that, so through Talktober, we're encouraging guys to reach out to friends throughout the month, colleagues, family members, and you know, ask how they're going, catch up for a game of golf, a beer, or anything that, you know, you enjoy doing. Because the Male Hug's real focus is on that early stage prevention education phase of talking. We're not crisis management. We're not experts in deep, you know, mental health troubles. But although we do have some wonderful people on the team like yourself who are well experienced in the area of mental health. But yeah, Talktober is encouraging people to talk to each other, and you know, basically a lot of good stuff comes out of that, because the minute that you get talking is the minute that the healing starts. So that's essentially, and we've got some exciting plans for this year's Talktober that we're currently working on. But and we got some wonderful ambassadors that actually support the Talktober campaign. Kevin Sheedy, Matthew Richardson, Tim Manor, Peter Hitchener. We've had Peter Dacos, Andrew Gaze. There's a number of names that have got a real profile out there that have been very, very passionate supporters of the Talktober campaign. So the plan for Talktober is to really take it to the whole country, for people to reach out and start connecting and talking, because it's very, very necessary.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, as you know, I've participated in Talktober
Yes.
a couple of times, and the thing that it really highlighted to me is that how many really good friends I have, but how seldom I actually reach out just to say hey, you know, and just to have a conversation and check in on them, and really be honest with them about what's going on in my life.
Yeah.
And to create a space where they can be really honest about what's going on in their life. And they're amazing connections, you know, and you know, to really discipline yourself to do it where you're reaching out to one person every single day for 31 days, that's, you know, that stretches you, but it creates you. I think if we just stop for a moment and consider the ripple effect of that, it's extraordinary.
Yeah.
And so how do people find out about Talktober? Where do they go to perhaps register their interest?
So yeah, so talktober.com.au or themalehug.com.au. All the information's on our website. We will start to obviously launch this year's campaign in the coming months. But yeah, social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, all the X, all the major platforms. And look, you know, John, at the end of the day, to be really, really honest here, what we're doing is, we're not reinventing the wheel. We're just, I've always believed that raising awareness about a topic goes a long way towards solving and providing a solution. And when you raise awareness with passionate, decent people, you know, people that have got a profile, and the word gets out there, and you use a marketing agency to drive the campaign, and many people hear about it. But you've got to have the courage to actually be raw and vulnerable, because you know, there's a lot of people out there that are struggling that never ever open up, and they continue like everything's fantastic and amazing until you know, until they hit real rock bottom. And we're trying to prevent people from getting there. We want them to start early, to start, you know, releasing little bits of information along the journey to ensure that they get the support and the help they need. So yeah, so there'll be a lot of media and promotional stuff coming out in the coming months around October.
Fantastic, mate. And you've got some other programs also. Like I attended a luncheon last year. It was a kick a goal for mental health. That was a great luncheon, and it's so interesting. Sometimes when you go to events like that, there's a lot of networking that goes on, people being a bit opportunistic, talking to people, wondering where there can be a business connection or something like that. But that event was so different because there was an incredible intention uh, behind it. And you had the wonderful Mike Brady get up and rewrite the lyrics of one of his great songs and just did a beautiful job. But the connections around those tables they were beautiful. And I've never seen that at a luncheon like that before. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that event, how it's expanding and what the plans are for 2024.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Yeah, no. So Kick a Goal for Mental Health was something that we developed around sort of probably April of last year, I think it was, and we thought let's do something mid-year, during the AFL season. And Jeff Schenker, one of our guys, came up with a name. I was having breakfast with him, and I thought that's a ripper. Kick a Goal for Mental Health. So we had about 300 people there at the MCG. Mike Brady, that song up there, Kazali's, one of my favourites. I came out here from Lebanon as a little kid. That was one of the first songs that I heard, through the AFL, and it was, I just fell in love with it. It takes you, if you watch the video to that song, it takes you back to a really happy place. The days of football, meat pies, connection, community, people jumping on trams, going to the MCG. It's just a different era, and so to have Mike there support that was incredible. Kevin Sheedy and obviously Matthew Richardson and Timmy Manor and others were in attendance. So yeah, about 300 people. We put it together really quick. We sold it out really quick, which is an incredible thing for all the guys to be able to do. We had some great support. We've got some wonderful corporate partners, like the Institute of Public Accountants have really supported us, Andrew Conway and his team, since day one, and that's been a massive thing for us. So this year we've got plans to go again in July. Kick a Goal for Mental Health number 2, and once again that'll be promoted very shortly as well. So yeah, very much looking forward to that.
Me too. It was a great event. Well, it's really cool, Tony, having you on and sharing, your perspectives and what's happening with the male hug. Is there anything else that you'd like to add, especially around this whole area of helping the men in our communities to step up a little bit and become more of who they can be? Because you and I both know that when crisis hits, men can be amazing. You look at when, environmental disasters hit areas, there's some men there that will just be hard at it for 48 hours straight without sleep, just, relieving suffering and making sure that kids have got somewhere safe to sleep. And, that like there's no end to what they can give when they open up their capacity for care. So just wondering if there's any other pieces that you'd like to add to this before we sort of close off.
Yeah, look, as I said earlier around the power of talking, I think a lot of men really need good support in their lives, and I reckon there's a lot of men that are missing that support through either through family or friendship circles or work circles. But and that's where the Male Hug tries to provide that support through our buddy program. We've got buddies there that are ready and waiting to speak to anybody that's looking for a conversation through our 1-800-MY-BUDDY line. But men, have always been known as providers and the tough guys in the community that can look after things when things need to be looked after, but they need to be looked after as well. And so that's something that we can all do for each other, is to really get around one another and be there for each other, and make sure that if somebody wants to have a chat, someone's there waiting to have a chat with them, because it's way too important, particularly in these days post COVID and what that's done to the communities around the place. So really talking, the power of talking, John, that's the big thing.
Yes, Tony, I agree. Okay, so I've got a question for you. So in this segment of the podcast, I like to talk about role models and what made them so. So as you were, growing up or even in your adult life, Tony, tell us about a man that you looked up to and, somebody you admired and perhaps maybe somebody that you could have even modeled yourself on, perhaps.
It's a tough question, isn't it? But obviously, growing up as a youngster, my father was someone that I admired him for his generosity and his big heart. They were the two things that he's just a decent, a decent guy who had a big heart and was very generous. Would always put others before himself. Made a lot of mistakes, like many people do. Young guy out here, wanting to enjoy life, and sometimes that takes you away from things. But he was absolutely that. He was just a big-hearted, generous, very decent human being, and that's how I've tried to live my life. So yeah, and we lost him very early, and that was obviously that had a massive impact on me. But yeah, it's the journey of life is quite the journey. So not a day goes by where he's not missed.
Well, I look at men like your dad, who came here from another country and started life again. I just wonder about the courage to actually do that. I think we forget that about our immigrant Australians, the cost for them to actually uproot themselves and leave their extended family and resettle in another country where, there was racism was pretty alive for them, and just must have been enormously courageous for him to make that step.
Oh, a lot of the migrants that came over from Lebanon or Greece or Italy, wherever they came from, that would have been to come to a foreign land and not have many people that out here to support you, and they all relied on each other. There were many that came across with them, and I remember growing up as a kid, there was a lot of families at our place, and there were always barbecues and events and functions, and there were close friendships, which you don't really see in today's society. Yeah, they all lent on each other and really looked for each other for support. Yeah, would be a challenging thing to do, to just pack up and go to another country and start a fresh life. So a lot of respect for mum and dad and many like them that came out here to provide a life for us.
Absolutely. So, second last segment of this is what's happening in sport. And I just wanted to make a comment because, we often see some really good things in sport. People often pick out sport and they look for the bad in it. But I was really taken aback this last week, to see what has happened with West Indian cricket, which has been in the doldrums for a very long time. The young elite athletes in the West Indies have really been sort of harvested up by basketball and soccer, and the talent pool for cricket has been pretty low. But then this young team turns up here in Australia as just hopefuls, and they take on the giants of the game in Australian cricket and beat us, and this young Shamar Joseph, fast bowler who's so humble after he went through the Australian batting lineup like a wrecking ball.
Yeah.
And 18 months ago, he was working in a labouring job in his community with little hope of any sort of bright future. But just a decision he made that he didn't want to recreate the life of his father, and he took a stretch to reach out to a cricket academy, and next thing he's a national hero. And I was encouraged by that because I thought, how many young kids in the West Indies now are going to look at him and go, wow, I can be that. And I was talking to my good friend, Greg Chappell, who's a legend of cricket and a very wise man. He said, John, the problem is he'll get snapped up by the IPL in India and he might get lost to the world of West Indian cricket. And I just hope that doesn't happen. But I saw that as being such a bright light in in sport this last week, and I just loved how humble that young guy really was.
Yeah, I saw that, and I couldn't agree more with you. Through the '80s, you know, I barracked for West Indies. They were the powerhouse of cricket, and the athletes and the players that they had. You know, Curtly Ambrose and Michael Marshall and all those fast bowlers and Clive Lloyd, and so that victory was quite a feat. And it was actually interesting to hear at a recent that event we were at. A former Australian great said that he was quietly barracking for the Windies in that game at home. So that was yeah. But look, West Indies cricket is very important for world cricket. No two ways. I mean, you know, it's been dominated by obviously India and Australia and England. But the Windies are a powerhouse, and it's nice to have them back.
Absolutely. Well, Tony, thanks so much for coming on to the podcast. It's been amazing. Always really good to chat to you. You and I have great conversations, and we get to consume a bit of coffee, which is something that's very dear to my heart while we're having those conversations. And I just want to finish the podcast off with my thought for the week. I like to pick up a quote from some person who had a great observation about men. And this one's from Norman Mailer. And he says, masculinity is not something given to you, but something you gain. And you gain it by winning small battles with honor. I really like that.
Love it. That's a ripper. Absolute ripper.
And
Yeah, I was just going to say thanks once again, Johnny, for having me. And yeah, I do love our conversations and look forward to our catch ups. And they keep me energized. And it's a pleasure to have you as part of our buddy group and one of the teams. So you know, once again, raising awareness and just having these types of conversations and giving, I suppose, giving men permission to have a chat and not feel embarrassed about it is so critical, because you just don't know the impact that it can have.
amen to that, Tony.
Thank you.
So my closing, thanks again, Tony. My closing point and my call to everybody is be the man you needed when you were a kid and in trouble. Take care out there.